Hi, I'm Lucy, and today we're going to be making Funfetti Jellybean Cupcakes. So we're going to start with our dry ingredients. I have 1 cup of flour in here, and I'm going to add the last third cup. And then to smooth it out, I just take my finger and go across the top, and then dump it in the mold. So next we're gonna add our baking powder, and I got my measuring spoons with all the different types of measurements. So I only need a teaspoon, so that's this one. And then there's a little ledge on here, so if you grab too much, kind of like with my finger, you just scrape it off and add it into the bowl with the flour. So now I'm gonna put a pinch of salt in our dry ingredients, and the salt emphasizes the sweet flavor, so then the salt just makes sweeter. So now we're gonna move on to our wet ingredients. So in a separate bowl, it's best if this is like a bowl you can put in your mixer that's separate from the dry ingredients. So I'm gonna put in 1 stick of butter, if I can get it open. Okay, and put it in the different bowl. And I've let the butter set out just on our counter for a little while, so it's at room temperature. You don't want super cold butter, otherwise it'll get really clumpy. But you don't want melted butter either, because that's just gonna make a mess into the wet ingredients. So next we're gonna add 2 eggs to the wet ingredients. I have a separate bowl here because if you get a little piece of shell with the egg, it's easier to separate it. So I didn't get a shell, so I'm just gonna add it in with the butter, and then I'll do our second egg. And no shell either, but usually you'll get a shell, so it's always better to just do it in the bowl in case you do. If you don't, it's fine too. So also just a little reminder, if you don't know this already, you need to wash your hands after handling eggs, otherwise you'll get sick, especially with raw eggs. Okay, so now I'm gonna add in my 1 cup of sugar, and you're probably wondering why we add sugar with the wet ingredients, because it is technically a dry ingredient. So basically, sugar needs to be broken down, and when you beat the wet ingredients, it helps break down the sugar, and it won't really affect anything because in most cake recipes, you will see that they add sugar with the wet ingredients. Okay, so next I'm gonna add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So a thing you might want to know about extracts is, especially with stronger flavors, you never ever want to use a whole bunch, because like for mint extract, it just gets to taste soapy. It does not taste good. For vanilla though, since it's such a mellow flavor, that's the flavor usually people use, because you can use more of it to really emphasize the flavor, but never use a whole bunch of extract. So now we're gonna add our milk, and I am gonna use almond milk because I'm allergic to lactose, which is a sugar in cow's milk. It doesn't affect most recipes that much. It won't affect this recipe at all. So I'm gonna measure 1/2 cup and add it to our wet ingredients. Try to be precise with all the ingredients, because if not, your cupcake will either come out too wet or too dry, or it just won't. Okay, so I put the bowl that has the wet ingredients in it into our stand mixer. And this is the paddle attachment. That's what we're gonna use. And it's a little hard to get this on, so there's this little part that comes out farther. And you gotta stick it on into the hole and then twist. Okay, so I'm gonna lock the top of the stand mixer and I'm gonna put it on 2 because we have wet ingredients and we don't want them to splash everywhere. Okay, so now we mixed up the wet ingredients in the stand mixer for like a few minutes. Also, I forgot to tell you, you need to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Our oven will beep when it's ready, so if you hear a beep, it's just that. Okay, so this is the bowl with our dry ingredients, and we're gonna add it in to. Okay, so I have it on as low as the stand mixer can go, and we're gonna add in our dry ingredients, little bits at a time. So add it little bits by little bits, and so now we're gonna add in the last little bit, and let it mix until it's like a thick batter. Okay, so I stopped the mixer for a second. So there's some of the dry ingredients are up on the edge and the mixer isn't getting them. So you have to stop the mixer. Don't do this while the mixer is on. And take a spatula and push down all the dry ingredients so that then they can get mixed in. So now we're gonna get our muffin tin ready while the batter's still mixing. So put one of the cupcake papers designed for cupcakes in each hole in the muffin pan. Okay, so I took the cake batter out from the mixer, and since it's a Funfetti cake batter, we're gonna add in the sprinkles. If you add the sprinkles into the cake batter while it's still mixing, you're gonna have white clumps in your batter and you're gonna have all the color mixed together and it's gonna be brown. So I just have a rubber spatula and I'm gonna pour in the sprinkles. You can use as many sprinkles as you want. And I'm gonna gently stir in the sprinkles to make it a Funfetti cake. Okay, so now I'm gonna add my Funfetti batter into the cake pan. If the cupcake papers are up a little bit, don't be worried. They'll sink down when you add the batter. And I'm just gonna use an ice cream scoop. It's the easiest way to do it. And make sure it's not dripping first. And put it in one of the cupcake tins. You might need more than 1 scoop depending on your size. I'm gonna need 2 scoops to fill up the cupcake. Okay, so I'm on my last one, and if you get a little bit of the batter on the tray, it's fine, but try not to get like a lot on the tray. Okay, so I found out that 2 scoops is perfect for my cupcakes. Again, you could need more, you could need less, depending on your size of scoop. Because you want your cupcake papers to be about 2/3 full. So, yeah. Okay, so now I'm gonna go over and put them in the oven. And they need to be in the oven for 18 to 20 minutes, so I'm just gonna set a timer. So So for the buttercream, which is the frosting, we're gonna use the whisk attachment, and you put it on the exact same way as you put on the paddle attachment. Okay, so I have 2 sticks of softened butter, and I softened them the same way I did for the cake batter. I just left them on the counter for a while to come to room temperature. And open them into the mixer. And now I put the stand mixer down, unlocking it, putting it on low, and I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract to the buttercream. Now I'm gonna add a pinch of salt. The recipe for buttercream usually calls for unsalted butter, and they add salt later. I use salted butter so I don't have to add as much salt later. Okay, so your buttercream should look like, well, whipped butter, and it should be light and fluffy. And now I'm gonna add in the almond milk because, again, I'm allergic to lactose. Again, this won't change the recipe at all. It won't change this frosting recipe either. So I know this seems like a lot of powdered sugar, but you need 3 cups. And since I have a half measuring cup, I'm gonna do 6 scoops of this. Now I'm gonna do my last scoop. And if you have a cup measuring cup, you're only gonna do 3 scoops. So the timer for my cupcakes just went off. It was 18 to 20 minutes, so I just did 18. And the trick to making sure your cupcakes are done is you take a toothpick and you slightly pull out the cupcakes. And you stick a toothpick in the center. And it came out dirty with some of the sprinkles and cupcake batter on it. So I'm gonna do another 2 minutes. The trick is, if your toothpick comes out clean, your cupcakes are done. If they come out with lots of the goop and batter still on them, then you have to leave it in for some more minutes. Okay, so I set it for 2 more minutes, and let's check them. Came out perfectly clean. Pull them out of the oven. So I took my cupcakes out of the oven, and I'm gonna let them cool for about 15 minutes. And meanwhile, I'm gonna keep going with my buttercream. So I put in the powdered sugar. And so to keep it from destroying my kitchen with powdered sugar everywhere, we take a cloth and take it over the mixer and put it on low and mix it so then all the powdered sugar goes on the cloth. Okay, so now I'm going to color my buttercream with some light yellow gel food color. And I use gel food coloring because it has a bigger and brighter color than just normal liquid food coloring. And I use the toothpick to spread the gel food coloring. And you can always add more, but like the same thing as extract, you can always add more and get the flavor to be greater or the color to be greater, but you can't go back and take away coloring or flavoring. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to put the buttercream into a piping bag. So it's easier to do it with 2 people, so one to hold the bag and one to scoop in the frosting. But if you're alone, you can do it with a cup. So I put the piping bag. It's just a bag that like is in a triangle shape and goes like that, and it's in the glass. And I put the top over the outside or the rim. And I'm just gonna scoop in some buttercream to put into it. Never put your spoon or rubber spatula or whatever you're using to put it in the piping bag all the way down, because it will get stuck and it's gonna be a hard time getting it back out. Okay. So I filled my piping bag and I cut a little hole in the bottom. There is something called a piping tip and a coupler where you put it in, and it has a little design on the bottom. It'll help you have like ridges and different designs in it. But I just cut it so then it's a normal hole. And our cupcakes are gonna come out of the pan. They cool better after they come out of the pan. They've cooled a little bit so they won't burn me. So then they'll cool and we'll be ready to decorate. Okay, so now it's time for decorating. So since we're gonna fill them with jelly beans, I'm gonna take a spoon. It can be any spoon really. I just have this little special one. And we're gonna make a circle in the middle of the cupcake. And we're gonna pull that out. And you can always hollow it out more if you need to. Then we're gonna take like 3 or 4 jelly beans and put them in the hole. So now the frosting we put in the bag from earlier, you can, if you're making normal cupcakes, do a really tall swirl, but since I'm gonna put other stuff on top, I'm just doing a little swirl to cover the jelly bean, so it's a little surprise. Okay, so then I'm gonna take marshmallows. It's best if they're like jumbo marshmallows. Be very careful and cut it diagonally, which is from one corner to the other corner. And then there's a sticky part, and that's the middle part that you don't normally touch. And you're gonna put it, and I have these sugar sprinkles that are rainbow colored. Put both sides in, and I'm gonna make a flower. And then one more time, we're gonna cut it diagonally, and you can do as many petals as you want with any kind of sprinkles. I'm gonna do 5 petals just because that design fits on my cupcake, and I like that design. And this is my last one. Just gonna put it on and make sure they all stay on the cupcake because you don't want any petals falling off your cupcake. And then take one jelly bean, stick it in the middle, and then you got a flower. And that's how you make Funfetti Jellybean cupcakes. Thanks for watching.